That night, when his hand struck my face, I didn't cry. I didn't yell or beg him to stop. I just stood there, tasting blood and wine, wondering how long I'd been pretending that love was supposed to hurt quietly. He waited for the old version of me, the one who always apologized first, to come crawling back. But she didn't. She was gone long before his anger landed. In that moment, I realized I had been disappearing piece by piece for years. Every sorry, every forced smile, every promise that if I just stayed calm, he'd remember who we used to be. He never did. So I stayed silent, not because I was afraid, but because something in me finally broke in a way he couldn't see. And I knew, with a stillness that scared even me, that the next time he looked at me like that, he'd have no idea what was already set in motion. The first morning of June was quiet, the lake outside still and silver under a low sun. People said this place had a way of calming them, of softening whatever noise they carried. Maybe that's why guests kept coming back to Lakeside Haven. They wanted silence, and I knew how to give it. Warm coffee, polite smiles, no questions asked. Elliot liked to tell people I had a gift for hospitality, and the town believed him. To them, we were the kind of couple that proved small-town love still worked. He was the reliable man in uniform. I was the woman who knew her place. But when the guests left and the doors closed, the only thing I heard was the creak of old floorboards under his boots. He had that practiced charm that made everyone trust him. Every handshake, every nod, every gentle touch on my back when we walked through a crowd. Each movement rehearsed, each smile perfectly timed. To anyone else, it looked like devotion. To me, it felt like a leash disguised as affection. That night, after the fundraiser, the scent of cologne and bourbon filled the kitchen before I even turned around. His voice was calm, the kind that hides sharp edges. He said I'd embarrassed him, that I'd made him look small. I tried to answer lightly, but his hand moved faster than my words. The glass toppled, red wine spilling across the counter, crawling down the fabric of my dress. The sound stopped there. No shouting, no apology, just the tick of the clock and the pulse in my throat. He waited for tears that didn't come, for a surrender I no longer felt capable of giving. Later, after he went upstairs, I wiped the floor, changed clothes, and stared at the reflection in the window. My face was swollen, my eyes steady. Somewhere in the stillness, something shifted, a quiet understanding that this silence was no longer submission. It was the start of something he'd never see coming. The next morning, Elliot moved around the kitchen as if the night before had never happened. He hummed under his breath while the coffee brewed, asked if I'd remembered to order supplies, reminded me to meet the delivery truck at 3. Then, as he buttoned his shirt, he mentioned checking the security system around the property. That word, security, hung in the air longer than it should have. He said it casually, but something in the way his tone wrapped around it made my stomach tighten. I couldn't name it then, but I felt it like a splinter under skin. Life with Elliot was a list of quiet instructions disguised as care. Don't go to the store after dark. It's not safe. Don't serve coffee to male guests. People might talk. Let me keep the safe key. You shouldn't have to worry about money. Each one sounded reasonable on its own, strung together. They built a fence so high I forgot there'd ever been a gate. For a long time, I believed that's what love looked like. Protection that left you smaller every day. But the truth crept in slowly, the way mold hides behind paint. One evening, while cleaning room 102, I noticed something odd. A tiny camera tucked behind the orchid on the dresser. A faint red light blinking like a heartbeat. When I asked about it later, he smiled the way people do when they're sure of their righteousness. "It's for your safety," he said. "You should thank me." From then on, I couldn't move through the house without feeling watched. The living room mirror reflected a small red pulse I hadn't seen before. When I turned off the lights, the glow stayed. I realized I couldn't remember the last time I had been truly alone. A few days later, while updating the inn's expenses, I accidentally opened one of Elliot's work emails. My name was in the subject line. My breath caught when I read it. Delilah's been unstable. I'll handle the property transfer paperwork. He was building a story, a version of me that didn't exist, one that made it easy to take everything I owned. I printed the email, folded it neatly, and hid it in an old medical folder inside my desk. That night, I lay awake listening to the ceiling fan turn, feeling something harden quietly inside me. Silence. I realized wasn't just endurance anymore. It was surveillance. It was past midnight when I tried to log into our joint bank account. The screen flashed red. Invalid password. I tried again, and again. Then, on a hunch, I typed the date we'd received the keys to this house. The account opened instantly. My throat went dry. He'd built his ownership into the code. Every number, every reminder of what was supposed to be ours, rewired to belong only to him. I withdrew a small amount of cash the next morning, slipped half into a cookie tin in the pantry, and mailed the rest to an old friend out of state. I told myself it was just precaution, but the way my hands trembled said otherwise. That night, after Elliot fell asleep, I opened his laptop. The glow from the screen washed the room in blue. He was logged into something called Morgan Command. Dozens of camera feeds filled the display. The hallway, the living room, the kitchen, even the bedroom. And there I was, washing dishes, walking past, changing clothes, recorded like a wildlife documentary. My chest tightened as I watched him replay clips of me moving through the house. He didn't look curious. He looked possessive. I closed the laptop, heart pounding so loud I was sure he'd hear it upstairs. If I confronted him, he'd call me paranoid. If I ran, he'd follow. So I chose the only option left, pretend. The next morning, I poured his coffee, smiled when he mentioned how calm I seemed. I even laughed at one of his small jokes. But as he left for work, I pressed a small recorder under the kitchen counter. Later, another under the table, one more near the stairs. Every sound, every word, every door closing would now belong to me. He believed silence meant submission. He never realized it could mean observation. By late August, Savannah felt like it was holding its breath. The heat clung to the walls, thick and unmoving. The air conditioner hummed behind me, while Elliot paced the kitchen like a caged animal. He asked who I'd been talking to that morning. I said it was just a guest confirming a reservation. He stared, lips curling into a quiet smile that never reached his eyes. Then, without warning, the glass in his hand shattered against the wall. The sound split the air. A sharp edge caught my skin, and blood dotted the pale tile. Who was he? Delilah? He asked, low, almost tender. No one, I said. He stepped closer, wrapping my hand in a paper towel, his voice soft as sugar. I don't want to hurt you. Don't make me lose control. When he walked away, I stayed still, the room suddenly too quiet. He thought I was afraid, but I was listening. The closing door, his footsteps upstairs, the faint rush of wind sliding off the lake. The silence between us had weight now. It felt like glass, solid enough to keep me safe if I didn't move too fast. That night, I cleaned the wound and snapped a picture. I sent it to a number I hadn't used in years. Nora, a woman who'd once stayed at the inn. An hour later, a message came through. Delilah, it's Nora. I've seen this before. He's escalating. Nora used to be a cop. She asked to meet, just to talk. When we met at a diner off the highway, she didn't waste time. 5 years ago, she said, the rescue unit had opened an internal case on Elliot for attacking a female employee. The report vanished. The mayor's office had called it a misunderstanding. I asked why she was helping me. Nora stirred her coffee once, then said, because I know what it's like to be recorded and not believed. She told me to start collecting evidence, everything, no matter how small. Then she mentioned someone who might help. Lieutenant Briggs, a veteran in the department's Internal Affairs Division. He knew about the old case. He also owed her a favor. That night, I waited until Elliot's breathing deepened beside me, then slipped out of bed. I opened the drawer where I kept old medical supplies and found the tiny recorder I'd used years ago. I set it next to the vase on the counter and pressed record. A small red light flickered to life, the same color as the cameras he'd hidden. "Two can play that game," I whispered. For 3 nights. I left the recorder in the kitchen. It captured the rhythm of our house, the soft slam of doors, his restless pacing, the scrape of a chair against tile. I played it back in secret, headphones pressed tight, cataloging each sound like a language I was learning. On the 3rd night, I caught something new. A woman's laugh, faint but real, followed by Elliot's voice, low and confident. "She's been too quiet lately. I might need to fix that." I sent the file to Nora. A few minutes later, her reply came. "Got him." She and Briggs submitted it to the department to request a temporary surveillance order. If I could get one more recording, his threat in his own voice, they'd have grounds for an official investigation. So I played my part. I cooked breakfast, smiled when he complimented me, laughed at his stories. He rested his hand on my shoulder and said he was glad I'd come back to my senses. I never left. I told him, "Steady." The recorder in my pocket hummed quietly between us. A week later, he brought home a stack of insurance papers. The top page bore my name. "Just sign here," he said. "It'll make things easier if something ever happens to you." I signed without a word, the pen in my hand doubling as a recorder. The tip clicked softly. Then came the line I'd been waiting for. "If you ever make me look weak again, I'll make you disappear in that lake." I let the silence stretch until he walked away. Then I looked out the window, the moon drifting across the dark water. The night air slipped through the cracks of the window frame, cool against my skin. I wasn't sure if what I felt was fear or the first quiet edge of victory taking shape. The storm had been crawling toward Savannah all week. Elliot said it would pass, that we couldn't cancel the fundraiser. Too many people were counting on us. He smiled like always, calm, heroic, certain. I matched his smile, pretending I still believed in the man everyone else saw. At sunrise, I brewed coffee, ironed tablecloths, and counted each place setting like steps in a plan. Before noon, Nora and Lieutenant Briggs came quietly through the back door, rain on their jackets. They carried 2 hidden mics and a battery camera. One went inside the storage room, one beneath the porch rail. Both places Elliot liked to corner me when no one was watching. By evening, the house glowed gold. The mayor, his wife, half the rescue team, everyone came. Elliot arrived in uniform, badge polished, voice warm. He shook hands, smiled for photos, played his part perfectly. He leaned close, his breath sweet with bourbon. "Let me handle tonight. Don't make me fix things again." I smiled. "You'll be the star." Rain began to patter against the roof as jazz floated through the air. Guests laughed, unaware that the camera in my pocket was already blinking red. At 7, his phone lit up on the table. "Security alert. Unauthorized login to Morgan Command." His head snapped up. His eyes met mine, sharp, searching. I didn't blink. Later, he found me near the buffet, took my wrist under the tablecloth, squeezing until I felt the bones shift. "If you ruin this night, I'll ruin your life." "You don't have to," I said quietly. "You're doing it yourself." For the first time, he looked uncertain. I brushed his collar gently, a dutiful wife, and the mic there caught every word. By 8, thunder shook the windows. Lightning rolled over the lake. The lights flickered. Someone joked about Savannah taking a beating. Elliot stood. "I'll check the porch. Come with me." He dragged me through the kitchen into the storage room. The door slammed. Rain hammered the tin roof. The flashlight beam carved shadows across his face. "What did you do?" "Nothing." "You touched my system. You think I wouldn't know?" He stepped closer, breath heavy with whiskey. "I own this house. I own you." He didn't notice the tiny red glow in the corner. Nora had linked the feed to the rescue station across town, 24 people now watching their hero. Lightning split the sky. He shoved me hard. I hit the shelf, boxes crashing. The sound cut through the music. Guests stopped talking. At that moment, The live stream flickered to life on the big screen downtown. Elliot's voice booming, "You'll never leave me alive." Nora pushed the door open, rain in her hair. Briggs followed, 2 officers behind him. Elliot froze, face drained of color. "It isn't what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," Briggs said. The radio crackled. The storm screamed outside. As they cuffed him, Elliot's voice broke. "Delilah, say something!" I looked at him and shook my head. The silence that followed wasn't weakness anymore. It was everything he could no longer command. Wind tore through the trees, bending them toward the lake. Rain hammered the porch roof so hard, it rattled like a heartbeat. Red and blue lights flashed across the wet windows, slicing through the darkness. Elliot burst through the door in his soaked uniform, his badge catching the lightning like a curse. He bolted toward the rescue truck, mud splashing under his boots. Briggs's voice cut through the storm, sharp and steady. "Elliot Morgan, step out of the vehicle." Elliot slammed the door shut, yelling over the rain. "She set me up! She's crazy!" I stood at the top of the steps, rain running down my neck, the cold seeping into my skin. For the first time in years, my hands didn't shake. I looked at Briggs, my voice calm, even against the wind. "Everything you need is in the recorder." Elliot threw the door open again, ready to argue, but his foot slid in the mud. He went down hard. Briggs and 2 officers were on him in seconds, hands firm, cuffs clinking. The cameras flashed, news, guests, neighbors, capturing the moment the hero of Savannah became a criminal in uniform. The rain made his face shine like glass, but there was no light left in it. As they led him past me, he lifted his head, voice breaking. "Say something, Delilah, please." I met his eyes and said nothing. In that silence, he understood. The man who once controlled every word I spoke was finally undone by the one sound he could never command: my quiet. The guests saw him turn pale, and for the first time, it wasn't me who feared the silence. A week later, the courthouse in Chatham County smelled of polished wood and burnt coffee. I sat beside Nora, fingers laced together to keep them still. Across the aisle, Elliot sat slumped in a wrinkled suit, the badge long gone, his face drawn and gray. When the clerk pressed play, the room fell silent. On the screen, Elliot's voice thundered, "I own you!" followed by the sound of impact, my body hitting the floor, the storm roaring outside. The noise filled the courtroom like static under skin. No one moved. The mayor, his former team, the people who once called him a hero, each one stared at the floor. Then came the audio recording. His voice again, calm, controlled. "If you ruin this night, I'll ruin the rest of your life." And then nothing but my breath. The sound of survival. The judge turned toward me. "Mrs. Morgan, why didn't you ask for help sooner?" I met his eyes, my voice steady, because my silence was the only sound he couldn't control. The verdict came without hesitation. Elliot Morgan, guilty of domestic assault, unlawful surveillance, falsifying financial records, his badge revoked, his access stripped, a permanent restraining order issued. As they led him away, I didn't look back. Through the window, the rain had stopped. The lake shimmered under a pale blue sky. The emptiness inside me wasn't grief. It was space. Finally mine. Wide enough to breathe. The first morning after the hearing, I woke to the sound of wind brushing the curtains, not the kind that warned of storms, but the soft, living kind that belonged to an ordinary day. Lakeside Haven was still. No heavy footsteps, no hidden cameras humming behind the walls. I opened the kitchen window, letting sunlight spill across the floor. The old coffee pot on the counter still held the faint scent of yesterday. I moved the dining table to a new spot, the one where sunlight hit directly, where Elliot once said it was too bright. I wanted the light to fall there now. On me. Nora stopped by, a white envelope in her hand. "Briggs wants to know if you'd consider joining the victim support program," she said. "They need someone who understands silence." I smiled, eyes stinging. Maybe it's time, if I made it through the storm. Maybe I can help someone else find their way out. After she left, I poured another cup of coffee and sat on the porch. The lake shimmered, calm and clean. The wind was warm, carrying the sound of summer and distant church bells. I traced the crack in the wooden floor, the one he left that night. I never fixed it. Some things are better left as proof that we survived. In my journal, I wrote, "That morning, I spoke without a word, and the lake finally listened." The silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was full of breath, full of freedom.